Well, hello there, Space Monkeys. Welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm Robert Durden. And in this episode, we're going to talk about propaganda, and I'm going to do a fair bit of tooting my own horn, talking about something that I said last year that I got a lot of flack for, and I was right again. We're going to talk about the propaganda apparatus we're seeing in the United States right now. The multi-billion-dollar apparatus is beyond anything I've ever seen before, and it's actually all the punches that they're pulling right now, the comprehensive blanket of propaganda that they're throwing out at us via mainstream media, but not just like news sources, but also like commercials, SNL, is ridiculous. Like the Ukrainian flag bots that are all over Twitter. It's a tidal wave, a tsunami of propaganda right now. And I wanted to remind you guys of the sentiment that I talked about in my segment on the General Strike Summit that got me in so much trouble from those bots, which is propaganda not just amplifies false stories, but it also attacks true stories. And we're seeing both of those side by side right now. Now, on the General Strike Summit, the two stories that I used to explain this concept side by side were how the DNC and the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton have done a fair bit of planting stories to try to link Trump to Russia. The Alpha Bank story was the example that I used, and how the Perkins Coie lawyer that was, basically working for the Clinton campaign, literally on their payroll, had planted a false story about how Trump was linked to a Russian bank called Alpha Bank. And as it turned out, that was all bogus. Michael Sussman got caught lying under oath to the FBI. He was on the payroll at the time. So that indicates that these very rich and powerful elites have no problem planting fake stories that will fit their narrative and literally creating a narrative around these fake stories. That is happening now with Russia-Ukraine, and we're going to go over some examples. The other thing that they did, and I use this other story as example of that, is if you guys remember, right before the election between Biden and Trump, the New York Post wrote an article about Hunter Biden's emails and how Hunter Biden was basically doing pay-to-play with Joe Biden as his father when he was on the board of Burisma, the Ukrainian gas company. They had found some emails that actually did prove that he was doing pay-to-play. People were paying Hunter Biden. He was the vessel through which bribes came in to get access to Joe Biden. And that article got censored off of Twitter, and you couldn't share it, you couldn't message to it, and then they actually suspended the New York Post's Twitter account, so they couldn't do anything until after the election was done. So this is the other branch of what propaganda does, and what this American propaganda apparatus is very adept at, is they actually, and this was a true story, they're very good at also stifling correct information. And we're going to go over some examples of how they're doing that right now. So I got in some trouble for talking about those two stories side by side. I got attacked relentlessly. But this is why. Because I was talking about what's happening right now, and I told you guys that there's a solution. We're going to get to that last. And my answer is exactly the same as it was 6 months back. So let's talk about what they're doing right now to promote bad information. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but there's been a plethora of fake stories that have come out lately about the Ukraine crisis, about what's going on. You'll see pictures of people that said, oh, this guy was killed by a bomb. And then you find out that it was actually a picture taken back in 10 years ago from a completely different part of the world, like Israel or Palestine or whatever. And then you find out that that's fake. You find out that, oh, there's this picture of a bomb exploding in Kiev. And then you find out it's actually Yugoslavia. How about the Snake Island fiasco? TYT ran with that like crazy. There was the warship in the Black Sea that the Ukrainians told the Russian warship to go fuck themselves before they were allegedly killed. And TYT ran with it like, oh, Cenk was like crying on his show, like, oh my God, they're such heroes. They told them to go fuck themselves and then they were killed. And then now we find out actually that they're still alive. So they have not retracted at all. They've not apologized for being wrong on that. It's just funny. They're just doing their thing, running out there with fake stories like Russiagate they did for 4 years. Now they're doing this shit. Again, anti-Russia propaganda. So you can see, guys, there's a pattern here. I've seen more stuff come out that is fake about Ukraine, like obviously doctored photos. You may have seen the photo with the people, there were like civilians in Ukraine that they said they've given them AK-47s. But then you look at the picture taken and the two people in the picture have like cardboard guns. It's obvious propaganda. So you're seeing like a plethora of what seem to be planted stories, very similar to what the Hillary Clinton campaign did with the Perkins Coie lawyer Michael Sussman and the Trump Alpha Bank story. So ask yourself why. And ask yourself, if you are on the side of these people, if you're one of those people with a Ukraine flag next to your name on Twitter or whatever, because you think that Putin's the most evil person in the world, he's the next Hitler, and that we need to go into Ukraine and arm them further because that's the way to fix this, that's the way to avoid World War III, is adding more weapons into the situation. Ask yourself why you always happen to be on the side of the people that are planting the fake stories and that happen to be wrong consistently through these things. You might just do some introspection and maybe don't go to those sources. If you find one of these false stories at a source, chances are they're being manipulated by the powers that be, whether they're useful idiots or directly on the payroll. Doesn't really matter. They're putting out false information and not retracting. Those people need to be ignored. They need to be ignored. Second part, guys, they are actively now stifling correct information. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, but there are plenty of Twitter accounts and commentators and journalists who are being taken down or labeled as Russian-affiliated media. RT was completely taken down, Sputnik Radio as well. And anybody that's been a contributor to RT generally has been labeled. There's, everybody from like Richie Medhurst, Caleb Maupin, all of these people are now being like demonized as Russian propagandists, like pro-Russia propagandists, when we know, and I know personally because I know Tara Reid, who writes for RT does not, in fact, tell their writers and their commentators what to say. Lee Camp came out recently and said this as well publicly on his show. He's like, no, they don't tell me what to say. So it's weird that they're stifling a whole bunch of people who are actually doing good work and breaking down what's actually going on in Ukraine. And that includes everybody I just mentioned right here. It seems interesting that all of those people are suddenly being either taken down or, at best, just demonized as Russian propaganda. That seems to me like the propaganda apparatus in the United States trying to take down the competition, trying to take down not the competition for propaganda, but take down the people who are good at recognizing their own propaganda and debunking it. So I would recommend that, kind of like when you find out that a book or a movie is being censored, taken down off the shelves, taken out of the libraries, my first thought when I hear about the government going out and stifling certain sources of information, my first thing is, well, I'm going to go out there and listen to what they have to say, because they're getting stifled by our government, the established government, for a reason. And it ain't because they love Putin or they're being paid by Putin. Bullshit. A lot of these people are actually anti what Putin's doing right now, but they're giving you good information on what's actually happening in Ukraine, which is that Russia is invading and fighting a whole bunch of Nazis, actually. And they're trying to stifle those voices. So Caleb Maupin, Richie Medhurst, Jackson Hinkle did a good breakdown. Blue Moon Red Wine, my INN comrade Lucy, did a great breakdown on a lot of the false information that's been coming out here. RT, I would go just check those out and just decide for yourself whether or not they're propagandizing you. At least when they get stuff wrong, they admit it. But the other mainstream media sources like TYT, for instance, or all of these bullshitters who are going out there with this nonsense, well, Ukraine can't actually be neo-Nazi because they have a Jewish president. I've seen that talking point all over the fucking place now. Okay, saying that the Ukraine, West Ukraine in particular, can't be neo-Nazi because they have a Jewish president is like saying that the United States government can't be racist because Kamala Harris is VP. See how that makes no goddamn sense? Zelensky's surrounded by neo-Nazis. He's done that deliberately. He's put a bunch of neo-Nazis around him in his cabinet. So what the fuck are we talking about? So anyway, it's ridiculous. If you're seeing these bullshit talking points and these false stories run with by an outlet, we need to ignore those outlets. And if, at best, I would also say, get online and start demonizing them. Make sure that nobody listens to them like I do. That's just, I get on and I'll trash TYT all day for running with that stupid-ass Snake Island story, which they were wrong about, and they'll never admit that they were wrong about it. So the solution is exactly the same thing that I said when I was on the General Strike Summit, and we need to just continue to do this. We need to fight both those arms of the propaganda apparatus by A, promoting the people that are telling the truth that are being smeared by the propaganda apparatus, which I have done numerous times in this video. Make sure that those journalists and those commentators have a voice. Spread them like wildfire as best we can. And then the other thing is making sure that we point out all of the false stories that get planted everywhere, which, again, Jackson Hinkle did a great job. Blue Moon Red Wine has done a good job. Richie Medhurst did a 5.5 hour live stream the other day, which was fabulous. I haven't even gotten through the whole thing. I'm like 3 hours in right now, but he was rolling. So just check these people out, and you decide for yourself if they're the ones telling the truth or if the TYTs and mainstream media are telling you the truth. Decide for yourself. But if we do those two things, we might be able to hold this juggernaut gargantuan apparatus at bay and keep the American people well educated enough on the actual situation in Ukraine that they can't manufacture consent for World War III or escalation. So that's what I have to say, guys. It seems a lot like they're wagging the dog right now. If you haven't seen that movie, go watch it. It's manufacturing a lot of consent for war via basically just doctoring things, misrepresenting what's actually happening in the fight that's going on in Ukraine right now. Straight up, having a green screen behind you and acting like you're there reporting, and then you find out the green screen malfunctions like it did with the Iraq war, and they're like, oh shit, cut it off, because we're not really there. It's obvious to me that they're wagging the dog right now, and we need to teach people what that means and how to fight against it as an individual. So take it or leave it, guys. But again, I hate to say I told you so. This is exactly what I expected, and it was really in full flight for like for COVID over the last couple of months. But with this escalation with Ukraine and Russia, they're pulling out all the punches right now. It is actually quite terrifying to behold. This is what a multi-billion-dollar propaganda apparatus is. It's bots, it's false stories, it's all mainstream media running with the same talking points that are handed down from up on high, and it's the stifling of all of the voices that are actually telling you the truth. And it's very scary. It's a very scary time in the United States right now. So, but like I said, once I start finding out who the mainstream media is demonizing and trying to stifle, my immediate reaction is always, well, I'm going to go see what those people have to say, because there's a fucking reason that those people are getting demonized, smeared, and indeed, like RT, taken down off the internet. I think their website even got taken down. So maybe it was because they were telling too much truth. But you guys decide for yourselves. Anyway, I got 2 more episodes I'll get up to you over the next couple of days. One will be a Rockfin exclusive, talking about natural immunity and COVID and some other studies that have just come out that are very comprehensive. And then I've got one more that's a little bit more lighthearted, I think, anyway. Keep fighting that good fight out there, guys. Go check out all the people that I'm going to post links to their videos below if you can. See ya.